When the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left.
In Rome, Pietro Cavallini is the author of one of the most precious treasures in the monastery of Santa Cecilia, the fresco painted on the counter facade of the church. This is the period when the basilica underwent a vast renovation campaign, culminating with the installation of the ciborium by Arnolfo di Cambio in 1293. The work depicts the second coming of Jesus into this world, according to the forms traditionally elaborated in the East and West on the Gospel of Matthew. But unlike two illustrious and earlier examples of Last Judgement, the Venetian Byzantine one in the Torcello Cathedral, and the Campania Byzantine one painted on the counterfacade of the Church of Sant'Angelo in firmness, in the fresco in Santa Cecilia, the painted sections are arranged horizontally, as are the figures themselves. In terms of topological categories, the placement of figures is punctuated by vast intervals. The figures do not appear crammed together, thus contributing to an atmosphere of remarkable order and balance. In the center appears the figure of Christ the Judge, seated on a precious throne decorated with gems. Below is the altar in the Byzantine manner, with the instruments of the Passion. In the main section, Christ is placed on the same perspective plane as all the other figures, not higher up and separated from the other protagonists, as in the previous examples. His face, treated with chiaroscuro, is rendered with a lively and deep gaze, and with a new and dynamic expressiveness compared to the previous Byzantine setting. The oval mandorla, the almond-shaped circle in which Christ is depicted, is surrounded by the angelic hosts, arranged in a crown. The cherubim look very elegant, wearing pearly white tunics banded like the archangels, with a green pallium alternately crossed on their chests, filled with gems with a refined design. The seraphim are placed instead in the upper part, with their faces emerging from the plumage of very large wings. Brilliant in their warm coloring, tending respectively to turquoise, to brown and bright red. Their spatial depth is rendered admirably with the changing color of their feathers. Standing at the right of Christ is the Virgin praying and facing the Eternal. Next to the Mother of God, we find the first theory of apostles, seated in their respective thrones. They are identifiable in Paul the Apostle. Thaddeus, James the Greater, Matthew, Bartholomew, and Philip. Standing to the left of Christ is Saint John the Baptist. Next to the forerunner, a second theory of apostles is depicted, symmetrical to the first. Peter, John, Thomas, James the Younger, Andrew, and Simon. All the apostles, characterized by a physical presence and volume, totally unfamiliar to the Byzantine manner, are defined by common codes of gestures and facial expressions. But they are at the same time different from each other, due to variations in the expression and posture of the individual figures. The draperies are not repetitive, but change according to the position of the limbs. The faces are depicted with extreme individuality, so that they can be interpreted as portraits, as opposed to the usual practice of their idealization and standardization. The lower section, to the right of the Redeemer, depicts the Blessed welcomed by angels, divided into 3 groups. The closest to Christ are the holy deacons Lawrence and Stephen, the first martyr. Behind them is a crowned saint, greeted by an angel. This is probably Saint Cecilia, the patron saint of the Church. To the left of Christ are frescoed instead the souls of the damned, also divided into 3 groups, with angels intent on rejecting them. Remarkable and innovative are the angels blowing the trumpets of judgment, whose breath can be read in their swollen cheeks. The discovery and appreciation of the frescoes of St. Cecilia in Trastevere at the beginning of the 20th century marked a milestone of fundamental importance in the panorama of 13th century Roman painting. Indeed, it succeeded in opening a wide and definitive breach in the stylistic dualism within which it had previously been enclosed. On the one side, the influence of Cimabue's passage through Rome in 1272, and the Byzantine tradition on the other. Pietro Cavallini thus inaugurated modern painting in Rome, probably even before Giotto's interventions in St. John Lateran. The firmness of the layout of the figures, their classical monumentality, the subtle and carefully crafted color transitions with which the structured volumes of the bodies are constructed, make this fresco a nodal point for the conception of medieval pictorial space.